Hey guys, Kinggath here, and welcome to another episode of the Kinggath podcast. Today's guest is someone you probably don't even realize you're using a bunch of his mods because he's kind of like one of those secret coders that isn't worried about putting his name on everything, but he has helped with a ton of stuff and is on some really cool mods. And he also is the self-appointed, or maybe we've appointed him, I don't know, creationkit.com editor for the Fallout 4 side. Welcome, Scrivener.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, man, and thanks for all the work you've done for a bunch of different mods. So, I bet there are some mods that I don't even know that you've been a part of, but I know of the first mod that. So, you and I first spoke when I was more active in the Nexus Discord, and I remember checking out your source for the Gas Masks of the Wasteland mod. And I was really impressed by your code. Like, you are just you follow all of the like best practices in coding. Your stuff is very clean and easy to read. It's well commented. It's just like a dream to look at. And you're a good GitHub user, which so like those are two things that I try to do, but I'm never as good as someone like you. So I was like right away when I saw your stuff, I was like, oh, this is somebody that I'm gonna want to be friends with, because I just admire what you do with your code, that you're so disciplined and so clean with it.
Oh, thanks a lot. Yeah, Gas Mask of the Wasteland was probably my first big Fallout project after coming off of Skyrim. So I'd say I was still getting used to the new Papyrus 2.0, and probably Gas Mask of the Wasteland, the way I did it, maybe 3 layers abstraction too deep. But I'm getting better about that.
Yeah, that was the thing I noticed. Like when I looked over your code, that was when I was still trying to get my way around Papyrus, because I hadn't coded for anything for it. Like I had done Skyrim years before. And so like yours was like, when I looked at your code, I'm like, oh my God, you can do this level of abstraction and for modding? That's so awesome. And then I remember getting intimidated by how deep you had gone. So it's funny that now you're saying in hindsight you went too far.
Yeah, I'm not so deep with the inheritance and not so abstract anymore, but sometimes it gets a little out of hand. I think ODST is going that way, and now that I'm back, I'm gonna start trying to smooth a lot of that over.
So you're involved in the ODST. Now, is that going to end up being like a total conversion? Like, is that mod aiming to recreate more than just the weapons and armor?
They are doing some side stuff, and there's a lot of Halo side projects in the works. So maybe.
Because that mod, when I saw it come out, it's pretty huge already. Like, it's got a ton of stuff in it. And then so I didn't know that they were continuing to go. I didn't read into their future plans or anything. So they've still got a lot more coming that they need your expertise on.
Yeah, there's a couple of upcoming projects and some existing ones that are a little more low key, like Mizraya Armory. What else? The UNSC Armory. Just various weapon and armor packs for Halo, and a lot of these will be using either my scope framework for the weapons or the overlay frameworks for the helmets, and some other extra feature stuff. We want to bring back some Halo sort of features too. So
awesome. So I take it you're a big Halo fan on top of Bethesda game fan.
Oh yeah, that was first console I ever had was an Xbox. The first Xbox,
like the old school one. Yeah. Oh,
yeah, and thing. Halo was just the killer app for me.
Yeah, that was so good. I still have like fond memories of that gigantic beast controller that thing came with. Like every time they release the new controllers for the current gen of consoles, I'm like, come on, bring back the big fat boy again.
The Dukes.
The Duke, yeah. I saw somebody did like a custom build of that where the giant Xbox button was actually like a little LED screen, and it played the original Xbox logo on it, which was pretty sweet.
Huh, that's neat.
Yeah, fond memories of that. I don't know if in practice if I would still like it. Like, I don't know, when's the last time you held one of those? I can't remember.
Oh geez, I can't remember either. It's ancient times.
Right. It's like probably a decade ago. That's how old that system is now. But yeah, that's I loved that monster. And I don't know if it's just nostalgia or if it was actually better for me, because I got pretty good sized hands. But I also can use the current crop of console controllers no problem. In fact, I still do. I use an Xbox 360 controller still in all my testing.
Yeah, I heard it's actually not that bad, but I haven't tried it myself.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
Xbox on
it-
a PC controller.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. It's nice. It works pretty seamlessly. Even the Xbox One works as well, and works without having to do anything funky. I did have to go through some hoops to get this one work. My 360 controller working on Windows 10, but that might have just been me because I have all sorts of weird software installed. Maybe not a general problem for people. But the Xbox One is designed to work with it. Like they're like half the games actually work right on Windows 10. Like they're trying to make it. I think they're trying to get to a point where it's interchangeable. Like it doesn't matter which of the two you're on. I think that's kind of what Microsoft's trying to go toward, because then that gives them like the biggest user base there is in gaming of like, everybody owns a damn PC. So
Yeah, it should just be a USB device. It shouldn't be locked into
right.
a platform.
Yeah, there's no reason for them to platform lock things. So I think that's probably why they're advocating for the crossplay everywhere, and maybe Sony's pushing back a little bit, because if Sony has to compete at that level, they're in trouble, because it's like, okay, there are way more Windows users than there are PlayStation users. So now, do you aside from that old school console, do you play any consoles today, or are you strictly PC?
I had a 360 recently. I was trying to hunt down an old copy of Guitar Hero, but that didn't work out. So no.
Fair enough. It's so hard to go back, especially with Bethesda games. Like just the load screen times alone. As soon as I like taste those on PC, I'm like, okay, I'm done with my console. Put it away. Shelve that thing.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. It's like 50% load screen going
Oh
back to
man.
it.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Most of your time you're just sitting around waiting. It's good. It's a good way to bulk up if you just spend all your time snacking during those load screens.
Yeah, I know.
So you did a lot of Skyrim modding before Fallout 4, because I'm not. I am a bad Skyrim modder, so I never would release any of my stuff. I wasn't good at keeping track of what was going on in the community. So I had never heard of you prior to Fallout 4. So do you have a lot of catalog of stuff from Skyrim days?
Pretty much my Skyrim days were where I really started getting, I don't know, good at modding, but it took the
Okay,
entire life cycle of Skyrim to get to that point.
sure. It's no easy task to get good at
Like,
modding. Like this is, and every game it gets more and more complicated.
like I didn't even know how to program before I started Skyrim. Skyrim is where I figured that out.
That's awesome. So your first programming language is Papyrus, and
It
old,
is. It's
old
something
crappy
special.
Papyrus too. Yeah, what kind of freedom did you suddenly feel when you learned a proper, like like an object oriented language outside of there? My God, it must have been so freeing.
Yeah, it was maybe too much at first, but now I really just fell in love with it, and all thanks to just modding some stupid game.
Yeah, it's a great motivation. I think it's a great. I think this is the type of thing that like schools should be teaching people. Like they should be like teaching modding courses in high school, just to be like, hey, look, programming can do cool stuff, that you enjoy, and like that, like just use that as a hook to get them in. So,
Yeah, I
so,
totally agree.
so you learned programming entirely from Skyrim. Did you? And you said it took you the whole cycle. Do you have any mods that people have heard of on Skyrim? Like my other listeners are probably like, yeah, of course he does, you idiot. But I'm totally unfamiliar.
I had it actually an overlay framework for Skyrim is where I figured that out the first time.
Oh, cool.
There's also some smaller gameplay mods I have. One's called Vitality. Hardly remember what it does besides tweaks the base attributes. I guess it just lets you set the numbers whatever you want them to be.
Sure.
The health regeneration and so on and so forth.
So your overlay framework, so it's this. I mean, we started talking about this before we started recording. Was the fact that one of the real bummers about the modding scenes, and this seems to happen in every game, is that people like you and I will create frameworks with the idea of let's come up with a unified way to do this particular thing, and simplify it and expose it so that more mod authors can use it. Well, the problem becomes, and I know it's gotten a little better with Fallout 4. The problem becomes that it's hard for mod authors to justify putting requirements of other people's mods, even if they're framework mods. Do you have any thoughts on how we can deal with this? Because it's such a big problem. Because like you've got several really good frameworks, but the number of mods using them is very, very low.
There's really no good dependency system for any Bethesda games. Like, what's a good example of package manager? Like PPM.
Right. Like we need, yeah. I mean, well, we would. I think we need a couple of things to solve it. We would need like some sort of way to an easier way to gracefully fall back for people who don't have it, and we would need. I really think we need, and this is something like a lot of mod authors push against, but we need mod packs, man. We need that. We need that ability for people to just be like one click, download 50 mods.
Yeah, I didn't want to say it, but really, that the end game is like you got to get the right files on your computer, and that's how you do that without knowing about every single file on your computer.
Right. Yeah, because like it's not exciting for players to have to download these framework mods in their list. But now that we've got like the ESL has like changed things so much, because now all of a sudden your cap isn't 255 mods, and I guess it never really was for the hardcore users because they would just merge mods and stuff. But like the ESL format, I've suddenly like our limit is more like 4,000 mods. Especially for all because most mods tend to be they're abandonware, like they get released, never updated again, so those can easily be converted over to ESLs, and it's so like there's suddenly the idea of shirking framework mods just because of the mod limit suddenly goes out the window. So that's one positive thing. That
Yeah,
has
like
happened
most
in
of
Fallout
my
4.
frameworks are you open the ESP and there's like a single quest record in it, just enough to bind a
Right.
script instance, and it's like, yeah, it contributes nothing, you know.
Right, and so and then you can continue to. And then what's nice thing even with the ESLs is if you're just using something like that where you've just got a quest record and then all of your scripts, you can continue to update without having to deal with the problems of the ESL because you can update your scripts if you need to. Although looking over your code, I bet the number of bug reports you have is substantially lower than what I'm accustomed to in my mods.
The bugs are there,
But not
yeah, there's not much to say on that.
right on. Okay. So your first big one that you released for Fallout 4 was I don't think you released it, but the people you worked with was the Gas Mask of the Wasteland. Is that mod complete, or are you guys doing more for that? Because I know it looks pretty impressive right now.
Yeah, I think he's at a good stopping point. He's moving on to another sort of a project with cold weather survival based, and
Okay.
that'll tie into Gas Masks of the Wasteland a lot overall for a sort of a metro feel going on. So it's
Sure,
not
right.
the gas mask part of it is done, but he's moving on to the cold weather side of that.
So I assume then we'll get some cool frost effects on the gas masks.
Right, and some other neat things, some HUD-based widget stuff, and it'll be interesting.
Nice. So yeah, I think that was one of the other places I've crossed paths with you several times in our Fallout 4 modding history is over the working with HUD framework, which unfortunately itself has kind of become abandonware. But that was something like we desperately needed, and it was so awesome to see that Reg put that out and was able to get it working on Xbox, which was shocking.
Yeah, that was amazing, and without any script extender.
Right.
Yeah, that's just black magic.
Such a fantastic thing. But I think you guys made use of that on Gas Mask, correct?
Oh yeah, we did,
to get your little widget
and
thing.
still do.
Yeah. So is that something you want to continue to work support into, or are you guys thinking about doing something outside of that? And do you have some sort of fallback for people who don't have that, or is that a requirement on that mod and on the cold weather version?
If you don't have it installed, then you just won't get anything on your HUD.
Got it. Okay, so that is a requirement for that. Yeah, that's kind of how I've been doing things as well, because it's to try and compete. Like it would be very self-defeating for those of us who like to write frameworks to then proceed to not use existing community frameworks. Like we kind of almost need to scratch each other's backs there and then try and encourage people to use each other's frameworks so that we don't have to keep reinventing the damn wheel.
Yeah, there's a lot of good code out there that simply isn't being utilized to its potential.
Right. And so, I mean, one of the ways I know I can help with that is by putting more requirements on something like Sim Settlements. Because if you take an existing popular mod and suddenly throw a requirement on it, it's easier to make people swallow it. Like I've been avoiding it to this day, but what I've done instead is put a lot of optional requirements, which that's one of the things Bethesda fortunately did for us is a huge improvement to the code base or the papyrus base of Fallout 4 is we suddenly have access to all of these things to do, at least at the script level, to do all of these interdependency things with other mods without making them actual dependencies. So there's a lot of stuff.
Yes, inter-mod communication is a huge game changer.
Yeah, the way you can cast things, and like I'm still learning all the nuances of it, but I think I'm finally getting it to a point where I fully understand where I don't accidentally, because it's easy to accidentally introduce dependencies if you're not careful. But once you get your head wrapped around it, it's like, okay, this is insanely powerful, especially given the way it's such, it's like pulling teeth to get people to adopt the framework mods. So it's real.
Yeah,
nice
I generally avoid the hard dependencies as much as possible, but to throw in the optionals as often as possible.
Yeah. Well, one of the problems with it though is that, and I'm finding this out from, so I have a workshop framework I put out late last year, and it's one of those things where I know the code is so much better than what I wrote for Sim Settlements, because not only did, I have a lot of time of experience working with it, but I also worked a lot with E, who did the Annex of the Commonwealth, to come up with some of the threading code so that I wasn't starting from scratch and I wasn't working alone. So I got better code.
He's a genius, by the way.
Oh yeah, he too is him and you, the two of you. When I look at your code, I feel ashamed of all of my code. But yeah, so working on Workshop Framework, I have been trying to find ways to integrate it with Sim Settlements to get more people to use it. Without putting it as a hard requirement, because so far I've been able to put things like HUD Framework and Settlement Menu Manager as optional things. Like you get little bonuses, but you're not required to use them. With Workshop Framework, what I found once I started working with it directly in Conqueror is it's just so much easier if you just have it as a hard dependency. Like it's just so much more of a pleasure to work with. There's less code to write. You don't have to worry about like accidentally introducing a dependency. So like being able to just make it a hard requirement just makes the workflow go easier. So then you can develop content more rapidly.
Yeah, so, the hard requirement is certainly nice because you don't have to make as many assumptions when you're coding things, like less questions you're asking. Well, if I yank this out, well, how does that make this other thing work? And a million questions later.
Yeah, you almost have to do what you said you did too much of, which is you just have to abstract like crazy just to make sure you're prepared for all these like little weird scenarios. And it especially gets bad if you're trying to do multiple frameworks like that.
Yeah, it's always way too much abstraction sometimes for me. But sometimes you got to do that when you have all these moving parts that may or may not be there.
Right. So one of the things that the abstraction always gets me on is when I come back to my code after a break. The more I abstracted it, the harder it is for me to get back in and start doing things again. Then it's just like, oh God, why did I do that to myself?
I just sort of let it happen, honestly. I have a process I like to call wax on, wax off, where I put the wax on heavy, let all the extraction just happen, and then it's wax off, and then I tone it down,
Okay. So you go
optimize
full bore with it?
Yeah,
okay.
And then optimization. And it's cutting time. I get rid of all the fat, trim it off.
So you get to a point where it's like, okay, I thought this might be worth abstracting, but in the end, it's like that's too much. Like it's not necessary. I can snip that a little bit.
Exactly, but try to just follow my gut and just let things happen the first time around.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's a good play. I am definitely not as disciplined as you are on that. Sometimes I get to a point like I'll start out abstracting, and thinking about like, okay, how would another mod author make use of this feature? And then I'll get to a point where I'm like, okay, well now if I abstract all of these, it's going to take me 10 hours, or I could just do it hard coded and have a working demo in an hour and a half. And then it's like, and then sometimes I find myself like, let's shortcut that. I need to inspire myself here and get some stuff in game, especially if I don't have a lot of time that week or something, and I just want to get the idea out so I can see it. Sometimes that's where I find myself shortcutting, and to my own detriment later on, because it's much easier to abstract up front and then build the demo than vice versa. At least that's what I find.
Well, I've been trying to follow your example too, because that's my weakest point. It's just getting things done, getting it out there, and when it takes me like 8 months to make a perfectly a system with a perfect level of abstraction, and I just end up
Yeah.
not releasing stuff totally. But you're awesome. You can get her done and get it public release out. It's kind of amazing how
Well,
much productive you are.
yeah, well, I mean, that's just discipline from work, because I know I have to iterate and release as frequently as possible, because it's kind of like real artists will release is a quote I read from or heard from a game developer of like, it doesn't matter how good or how perfect your stuff is, if you never release and no one sees it, then it's like you did nothing. So that's kind of how my philosophy goes when going like that. But sometimes it bites me in the ass though, because I'll have, for example, with Sim Settlements initially. I will have I have no way to fix certain bugs I introduced early, because there's too big of a player base now, to where if I did it, I would basically be like, sorry, your saves are no good because I'd made this dumb choice early on.
Yeah, you just do the old clean save only, laugh out loud.
Yeah, that's kind of the way it has to go, and I try to avoid that at all. So yeah, so it's I think it's kind of one of those things you got to find a balance in, of getting the right amount of forethought in of what things you might want to implement in the future, or of what people might want to change, but then also getting it. You have to fight your own, or you have to support your own motivation too, because I imagine in those projects that take you 8 months, there are probably periods in there where you get bored, where you're just like, I can't look at abstract code again right now. Like I need to do something else.
Exactly. It can be exhausting sometimes.
Yeah. So I think that's most of the reason that I actually am disciplined enough to release it and keep putting things out, is because it's inspiring for me, because it's like I want to have fun with this too. It's why there are still to this day bugs in Sim Settlements 1, even though it's been out for almost 2 years now, is just because I get it. I make sure that like the major things are working, but when there's like little flaws here and there, little rough edges, or things that can they don't break the experience, but maybe they're just like, oh, that could be smoother. Those are the ones I tend to just push off for a while until I have, like I'll do those in bursts. So probably like the amount of effort you put in your framework, that's what I put in bug fixing. Like I'll have like a burst of like, all right, this week I'm going to knock out as many bugs as I can, and I'll all of a sudden there'll be just as massive patch notes. But then otherwise I've got to be focusing on and keeping myself excited about the project. And that requires hurrying up and iterating things out to get them in the game so I can play with them. And then I tend to, if I get something working well enough to where none of the testers break it, then I'm like, oh, screw it. Might as well put it in a patch and like let people play with it. So it's kind of just a self-motivating thing more than anything else, more than any particular goal or anything.
Right. The bug fixing can be pretty boring, going over ground you've been covering so many times. The new ground stuff is really what keeps me interested.
Yeah. It's especially fun to try and push the envelope too. Like when you try and find something that's like, I don't know if this would be possible, but let's find out. It probably is. And that's one of the things I've loved about Fallout 4 modding versus the brief modding I did in Skyrim, is I don't feel like I hit as many brick walls of like, that's not possible. It's pretty rare that that's happened in Fallout 4. How do you feel about that?
Usually I tend to work around the edge of my ability. So if I'm not pushing, beating my head against the wall, I'm not having fun, I guess.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. It's I think the other thing that keeps me going as far as to keep getting release stuff is I am kind of a jack of all trades. So when I get burned out on coding, I can go build, and like that's relaxing to me. So like if I'm just like my head is melted from framework work or something, like I have so many other things in the projects I'm working on that I can just pivot, because I happen to have like I trained to be a 3D animator at one point in my life, and then I just never used that skill anywhere, but it happens to be useful here. And then so like I could kind of jump from thing to thing, and that helps too with keeping yourself from getting burnt out on stuff like boring code or bug hunting or anything.
Yeah, I don't really have a good pivot to a different thing sort of method, since I pivot from one framework to a different framework. It usually does a trick, but sometimes you're just exhausted from the whole thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we only have they've determined that we've only got so many hours a day that you can act like you can really make decisions, like, and then the rest of the day you're just kind of on autopilot. So like the programmer fatigue is a very real thing, and it's why like I'll find a lot of times code I wrote like toward the end of the day, or not toward the end of the day necessarily because I work weird hours, but it'll be like If I do like a 16-hour marathon session, like my first 4 hours of code will be like perfectly abstracted, well commented, and then if you just looked at it over time, it would start to just look like a drunk guy scrawling because it's you just run out of the energy to like put in all that detail work, and so there's like you can almost burn out within your own sessions.
Yeah, I can relate to that.
It's probably not things people want to hear from their framework developers. We get lazy as we go. But I have gotten the discipline lately to go back and redo code. Like I'm not afraid to throw away code anymore, which is probably something that came from like committing to Fallout 4. Like I'm not, this is less of a, like my first mod, I was just like, yeah, maybe this will be something I get into. And, I would probably was desperately clinging to all the code I wrote, even if it was mediocre. It was like, well, that kind of works, so we're sticking to it. Now that I'm like in this for the long haul and I've got all these big plans, I'm kind of like, I get to a point where if I look at my code and I'm like, well, that's just crap and it's not released, I'm okay to just like, all right, throw it in the garbage, start again, like do it.
Yeah,
right.
that's a big thing is learning when to throw things in the garbage. And when you first start programming, and it's hard to throw something you worked hard on away. But
absolutely,
yeah, you gotta learn when it's best to do that.
Yeah, and so it's sometimes hard to tell, especially because sometimes you figure it out after you've written thousands of lines and multiple files of code. Like that's Workshop Framework went through that at one point. It was completely different, and I just like got to a point and I'm like, oh, I made a mistake at the fundamental level. Like I gotta start over.
That's a hard pill to swallow.
It is, but it's also I think. Once I had it in my head, like, all right, this is part of like a multi-year plan of what I'm trying to develop, then it was like, all right, if I don't do this right here, I'm going to pay for it later, like in a big way, because it's going to just like throw in wrenches all the way down the line, and I'm going to continue to eat this later. And I think that's kind of the case with these frameworks you're releasing publicly too, is if you get it to a point where, like, for example, if you cut a corner on your scopes framework and then some mod author comes along and is like, hey, I want to use your scopes framework. It looks really sweet. Can I do this? And you're like, oh, nope, I cut this corner. You can't do that. Then they might not use your thing. They might just create their own version. And then that defeats the whole purpose of the framework.
Yeah, it's really hard to sort of like hit that mark every time, though. It's the game's not doing you any favors most of the time.
That is definitely true. Yeah, we are. It does feel like we're battling the game engine quite frequently. Like it is possible to do everything. Well, most things. There's a handful of things that don't seem to be feasible without the script extender. But there are certain things where if you want to get them to work, it feels very hacky, and it's like, I don't know if this is the right way to go, but this is what works. Like this is what was available to us.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's the case half of the time.
Yeah. Hey, now have you ever been tempted to just like, or maybe you already have? I know we talked about earlier. You said that you take breaks from Bethesda modding. Have you found yourself tempted to go into something like Unreal Editor or Unity or any of those to just like go do your own game stuff?
Probably not game stuff. Just more general programming stuff is what I'll shift to when I'm not doing modding.
Sure. What kind of languages are you interested in?
C#'s my main jam, but I touch a lot of different things, and I have a couple friends in real life who do that as well, and I'll help them on their projects on their languages, and that's fun for me, a nice little break from modding.
Sure. So do you have any particular type of thing you like to work on? Like, do you have any grand goals outside of modding that you're working toward? Like, do you have any cool projects going on C# wise? Like, do you do frameworks for that as well, or apps you're developing?
No projects really. I'm mostly focused on honing my actual skill rather than pushing a product or something.
Sure. So just practicing, just doing things and trying to figure out.
Just practice and exercise and getting good.
Sure, that's understandable. Well, like I said, I think you've gotten exceptional at Papyrus. Do you keep all of your code? Because I know you had at the time. Your code for Gas Mask was on a public Git. Do you tend to do that with most of your Papyrus stuff? Keep that out there public?
Oh yeah, definitely. Anything I write, I'll put it online if I can. Awesome. But it turned out with just Gas Mask, it had a repository at one point, but it wasn't being utilized by the team. We had a different workflow that worked for everyone else, and it was just a duplication of the code, just an extra thing I had to babysit.
Sure. Yeah, I tend to do those anyway. Like even though like I keep private gits for most of my stuff because I'm not as confident in my code as you are. But the git, I find very few people, even when I do release them publicly, like Research Framework, very few people actually ever look at the code or download it. So it's almost just for the version control and nothing else. Like
Yeah, that's one thing about releasing your source. You think you're going to be embarrassed, but then it turns out it's like only 3 people will look at it ever.
right. But it's and I guess everybody's got their own styles and everything. So like every time I mention like I get embarrassed by my code, people are usually like, man, your code's no worse than anybody else's. Like
Yeah, your code's good. You're your own worst critic, I think.
Yeah, that's how I keep myself motivated. If I keep assuming my stuff is bad, I'll keep trying to improve. So
yeah, I secretly do the same thing to myself.
Well, yours is, I also, so while I'll self-criticize to propel myself forward, I also look at people like you and say like, okay, well, that's how I can improve. Because and it's really, to me, the big thing in improving in code is discipline. Like all of you out there who've been like, because I get a lot of requests to do coding tutorials and I just never have the time. One of the biggest things if you start teaching yourself to code is all those best practices that people promote. Like they do that for a reason. Like it's hard to understand the reasons up front when you're just trying to make stuff happen. But like, man, all those like little things of, coming up, making sure your code is like cleanly bracketed and like that you comment things like all of those people are giving you those tips for a very good reason. And it took me a long time to realize that, to like drop the ego and be like, all right, these people know what they're talking about. And so that's the best part. The best thing you can do to improve your coding is just get more disciplined about following best practices. So I don't know if when you say you're like sharpening your skills with C#, is that kind of where you're going, is like looking into other things people have figured out that are just better ways to do stuff and making sure you understand them?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, the C#'s a good one on that front because it's such a widespread language, because it's it's the only way you could program for Apple devices, and so like every programmer knows it to some extent, it seems. So like there's just so many resources out there and tutorials and ideas of how you can do it better, and it's really cool to see. I love languages that are really widespread for that reason. Like I love doing PHP and JavaScript because for web programming, because there's just so many resources. Like everybody under the sun knows those languages, so it's real easy to find more stuff to learn from and keep getting better at it.
Yeah, C# just has an incredibly like massive body of not only existing projects but also documentation and tutorials.
Yeah, and that's huge. That's one of the things that I always get disappointed with the Bethesda mod scene. It was really, really good during Skyrim days. Like there was like Tez Alliance. I'm trying to think of some of the other ones. There were always these groups and people that were putting out tons of resources to help other people learn how to mod. And that does not seem to be quite the case with Fallout 4, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, definitely, I can agree.
I think the user base of Fallout 4 is quite deep. There's a lot of players, but there's not enough people, I think, sharing their knowledge in how to mod. Because I think there's probably a lot of people out there, and I know there's a lot of people with great ideas, because I keep suggestions forums set up for all my mods, and people have some really cool ideas. And I think like just if they had a little bit more information to get started, they could implement some of them themselves, and we could see just a better overall mod scene. And it's one of those things where I guess that kind of falls on our shoulders. Like if we know it, we should be sharing it. And that's one of the things where like you do a lot of management of creationkit.com, which is awesome. Mm-hmm. Like I have never been the type to contribute much to wikis. I always just like, I have these grand ideas of how I could, and then it tends to be, I'm like a big vision person with my projects. Like I tend to explode them out of reality, and then I end up not having time to do them. So like I've had multiple times, I've had this big plan to do all this huge tutorial series and teach people how to program, and I just don't have the time. But you have found the time to manage creationkit.com. What got you into that? Like what made you inspired to manage that wiki and make sure it's accurate and clean and et cetera?
Just the same thing. Right after the Skyrim days, where we had all these sort of awesome little hubs of information and people, we didn't really have that for Fallout 4, and not to mention the Fallout 4 official wiki was just barren. There was nothing there. The only high level section that existed was the papyrus one, and the rest were literally empty. And not to mention the communities weren't really, there weren't any, I don't know how you say, like central hubs like Skyrim had, like Test Alliance and whatnot.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
So
and I still think the Fallout 4 wiki, like there's still I mean, you could spend a year adding content to that still. Like there's still so much that's not on there.
yeah, I haven't even touched game systems is still barren, and tutorials is essentially barren. And but it's I have the editor references done, so all of the CK forms and whatnot. I would say about 80% of them are done now.
Awesome. We are very happy about that because it's definitely better than it was. Like I do remember like the first couple of weeks after the CK was released, the site was basically useless. Like I would just go to the Skyrim side because it was like, all right, there's nothing here. So
And I think that's what they were counting on. Like I was looking at the internal logs. It looks like they had tried to basically make a Fallout copy, but then bailed out and deleted it all.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, that site's very interesting. The fact that like they do put up some stuff, because I know that like people are kind of hammering hard on Bethesda right now just because they put out a really bad game. But in general, they are very, very supportive of the modding community. Like they do more than most game companies do.
They really do, and people are, I don't know, spoiled or something.
I mean, that's really what it is. We're all spoiled. Like the games now that come out are insane. Like the amount of attention to detail and the amount of people that work on these things. Like the one I keep going to is RDR2. That game shouldn't exist. It's too good. Like it's like the number of man hours that must have gone into that is just insane. And then then obviously that makes us all kind of expect that from every game, and it's like that's not realistic. Like that's not an attainable goal for the average development team. And that's kind of like each new game that does that kind of sets our collective bar higher, and then people will start attacking stuff that doesn't reach that kind of level of quality. It's really funny when I see people do that to mods. And it's clear, like you can tell the people who are experienced with mods versus the people that are not, as they'll come on and they'll knock on mods, and it's like, what do you expect? You want them to do the same quality of work as a team of 400 people who are getting paid decent money for a living versus this one person doing it free by themselves? It's like, come on, man.
You can always tell the one dead giveaways, they start their sentence with a simple request. It's like, you don't know. That's not simple. Get out of here.
Mine, I always see it as it's usually something like, this is cool, but, and then this idea, like all these crazy ideas of how to expand it. It's like, come on.
Yeah.
But I think, I mean, it's to some extent, I'd say it's probably right that we do got to put pressure on Bethesda to keep moving forward, so they don't try and rest on their laurels and just keep producing Skyrim clones or something forever.
Same for modders too. We should be competing with each other and setting new bars, and have there should be some expectation level for mods as far as quality and feature sets.
I agree 100%. And but I think that's why I get obsessed with doing things like frameworks. So like when I built some settlements, I tried to work in as many ways for people to edit it as possible. And then Workshop Framework is just like a straight framework of the idea of like, all right, let's make it easy for people to stand on our shoulders. Like, here's all this work I'm already doing. It will just take me a little bit extra to make sure that you can benefit from it and build off of that. And I think that helps. I think that when we build our things as frameworks, it definitely can help people, especially if they're willing to use them.
And I definitely think that was a good investment of your time to put into putting that core tech of your mod into that framework.
Oh, I mean, the mod would not exist like it does today if I didn't make that decision. And that was one of those decisions I made midway through the development. Like, it was like I started building buildings, and I'm like, oh God, this, like, if I want to do what I have envisioned, like in my head, it was like, all right, I figure we need about 30 to 40 plots per settlement. There are 30 settlements or 35 settlements, and I want them to all be unique. It's like, let's do the math on that. So that's like, even if you go low end 30, that's like almost over 1,000 buildings. And I'm like, all right, well, that's impossible, because it would, they they take like, once you get good at them, it takes 7 or 8 hours to do a building. It's like, multiply that out. It's like, all right, well, that's like 10 years of my free time. So then I had to go back and do it. Now we've hit that goal already. Now there are over 1,000 buildings available in the community. So you can actually have a full Sim Settlements playthrough and no repeat buildings, which is pretty insane. But I think like just going in on that with any mod that that's going to have some sort of system is worthwhile, just for the sake of setting. Not only can we set the bar higher for future mods, but we can also give them a leg up and we can get to bigger things quicker. Because it's like, then when someone comes in with their idea, they're like, all right, well, these mods have already laid the foundation. I can work on I can use those as my basis instead of having to start from scratch.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. But you don't always see that in the community, like with the way that people view ownership. It's harder. It's a hard thing to convince people. Yes, you can just use this code. You can just take it.
Right. Yeah, and I don't know how we get past that. And that's one of those tough ones. I think it's kind of I think one of the things I mentioned. So when I first got into the Fallout 4 community, I noticed that there's kind of like this divide between, and it's probably exists in all modding communities, but I noticed it very prevalent in Fallout 4. Is there's almost this divide of where it's like creators versus consumers, and there's like an animosity there. Like I found a lot, and I know this isn't across the board, so I'm not trying to generalize here, but I found that when I was hanging around in the Nexus authors channel, there were a lot of people that were treating users like crap. Like it was just like this general consensus of users suck. They don't read the manual. They're always complaining. And I think that's a bad attitude to take, because I think like at the end of the day, like even though we're not making money on this, like those people they're the people we're creating for. Like what's the, like, there's a lot of argument you'll see on some of the mod authors will put on their page, like, this is for me, I'm sharing it with you. Like if that were really the case, why would you share it then? If it was just for you, why do you need to share it? And why do you, and then like you'll then see those same people be like, thank you for all the praise, like, because it helps, like getting that praise.
They just want the good without the bad.
Right. They don't want to take on the responsibility of the fact that, like, once you put your stuff out there, it's up for it's up for critique. Like people will be
critical about it.
Yeah. I try to take all of that criticism as like a way to improve, like as like not all of it. Like obviously there are some some scumlords out there who are just like gonna hate on everything unless it's RDR quality, like we were talking about.
Well, it's a sport for them, like they get off to it.
Right. Like it's just fun for them to go and give people a hard time, which is really twisted, but that's the internet. You kind of get used to that. Fortunately, you learn to just
that's
kind of ignore
internet.
that kind of garbage. Right. But yeah, I would love to see more people building up on frameworks and kind of pushing the envelope, because I think we can do. I think there's still tons more that can be done with Fallout 4. Like I don't think we've scratched
insane
the
amounts. We haven't even scratched the surface.
Right, like one of the big ones I keep waiting for somebody to figure out, and I know it's possible. Like all the stuff is still there from Skyrim, is dual wielding. Like why haven't we had that yet? Why can't I fight akimbo 10 millimeters? Like that would be amazing. Totally feasible. Just requires somebody to put in the time and effort into it.
Yeah, someone hasn't been obsessed about it yet.
Right. But those are the types of things that like that once somebody solves, I think it's important to get that either convert it into a framework, and then if that's outside your scope, at least sharing tutorials about how you figure stuff out, which is why I was blown away by the tutorial series that Rizzler just put out on YouTube the other day for weapon creation. Freaking fantastic. So much detail, touches on, because like weapons are one of those things where I think everybody has an idea for one, but you have no idea where to start.
There's a lot of moving parts and a lot of peripheral sort of things around weapons too.
Oh my God,
it's
much.
A big
There's
thing.
So many little things. Yeah, and then like you factor in the modification system that Fallout 4 has. It's crazy. I mean, like one weapon is like 60 records in the creation kit. Like, how would you know how to start that if you were, if you're fresh out of the gate? It's real hard.
Yeah, I've been around the scene a long time, and I get a little dizzy too looking at some of these.
It really gets me looking at like the one I found recently. That like there's so much more depth to the system I didn't even realize, is looking at the object template screen on a lot of these records. Like it's like, so, it's kind of out of the way. There's just like a button on actor records that's like all of a sudden here's a whole new screen of information. It's like, oh my god, there's that much more depth. Like the actor screen with just the tabs is deep enough, and then you toss in the templates too. It's like, holy crap, there's so much stuff.
Yikes! Yeah, I know. I've avoided documenting it on the wiki because it's just so massive.
Yeah, there's just so much to it, which is really awesome. It's awesome that Bethesda values their systems enough, because like that's the thing is, as somebody who likes abstraction and likes to code, and I can see exactly why Bethesda's games end up the way they do, where they're light on story, but they're incredible on systems. Like they abstract everything, and like each game they do more and more, and you can tell like they've just got some hardcore engineers who just love to systemify all elements of gameplay. Like you can see more and more of it with each game. Like in this game, they did more with the animation system. Like they have a whole systemized camera system. Like, so like the cinematic camera system they have in there is completely dynamic. Like most other games will rely on the fact that everything's pre-positioned, but because of how open world and the fact that all of these camera sequences happen out in the world, like their whole dialogue camera system and the VAT system are all done dynamically. And like most games don't do anything like that. And it's really impressive to see how much
it's exposed to the plugins and data files, and you can interact with it with scripting. Yeah, there's a full-fledged system there.
Yeah, it's fun to play around in. It's like it's almost like as a developer, it's like a little toy box. So are there any systems in Fallout 4 that you haven't played with yet that you would like to, like things that you're interested in or curious? Because I know you've done a lot with the HUD, like a ton with the HUD, and then you've touched on some cool stuff we'll talk about in a little bit here with F4SE and the Barstool games. But is there any of the systems in Fallout 4 you haven't had a chance to play with much that you'd like to get into in more depth?
UI is the big one because kind of like a black box. Not a lot of people know about it, so I sort of focused on that because I figure all the other systems, there's plenty of people out there that can just figure that out. So no, I haven't really been interested in looking at any other systems really.
So you're a big fan of UX then? Do you do that a lot outside of Bethesda modding, or outside of Fallout rather?
Oh, not at all. No,
no.
I don't really like UI work at all, whether that
Really?
be in C# or this. I just do it because it's the hardest part. It's the black box. It needs reverse engineering to even get started.
See,
so I figure someone's got to figure it out.
Well, I very much appreciate what you figured out, because there's some cool stuff that you've pulled off. The gas mask was incredibly impressive. I remember you showing iterations of your early versions when you were trying to figure it out. And
that's actually not UI based. That is hard coded stuff, and
it's all hard coded
models.
Oh, interesting.
If we are suspending a 3D model in front of the player's face, my overlay framework is the user interface version of that, sort of.
Ah, okay. That's awesome. Yeah, because there were a lot of animation files involved in that, right? To pull off some of that gas mask stuff.
With some animated objects and whatnot. But that was my first implementation before F4C had the stuff I needed to do. But the way I wanted to do it.
Yeah. See, this is where you and I fracture in our in our techniques. I am like a hardline no F4SE. Like I started to tickle the idea a little bit recently because I put in a hook for F4SE detection in Workshop Framework, but I haven't fleshed it out in any way. Like there's nothing there, but it's literally just a version check to see if it's installed. But I am a hardliner against it because of Xbox. Like if we didn't have modding on Xbox, I'd have been full hog into F4SE. But it's just too many players out there that are playing on console that it would be leaving out.
Yeah, I think your mod gives something really special to console, and that's a good hardline for your certain case here.
Yeah, but yeah, you can definitely. I mean, that opens up so many possibilities with F4SE, like Barstool games. Like, I mean, you have like a full implementation that looks almost as good, if not better, than the New Vegas implementation of Blackjack. Really incredible work.
Yeah, I think it looks just a little better than the New Vegas one. I impressed myself that time.
It's really well done. Now is that, I know because I work with White Collar a lot now, and he has said that you guys are kind of on break from that, but is that something you're gonna, but he's also mentioned many other games he wants to add to that. Is that something that interests you in pursuing further, of like trying to see what other things you can do. Because I assume, knowing you, you've got a great framework there to work with the cards and stuff, so you could probably relatively easy expand it into additional card games.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm probably never going to put that project down. I'm going to keep working on that. The whole idea is that the entire classic games, Barstool games, will be something that other modders can use, almost like a framework. I'm developing this for the Fallout New Vegas project. I hope that they will, when I finish, they'll be able to integrate that into their mod and be able to have some fully fledged card games for casinos and whatnot.
Awesome.
Same goes for Cascadia. It's not a framework as much as something I allow to be fully integrated into other mods.
Right, so they can just take the whole code base and put it in without needing to require...
Exactly. I wouldn't. Yeah. I don't think I can pull it off as a framework proper.
Right.
So yeah, something I will continue to develop on the GitHub, but we have a bunch of ideas, we're hammering out on our issues page.
Sweet. So do you mind telling us what the next game you plan on releasing for that is?
We're kicking around a few ideas. The last idea we had was to try, what is the game called? It's like multiplayer blackjack, Cadillac.
Okay.
Go for the card game Cadillac. But we'll see. Awesome. I wanted to try maybe like a dice game or something.
Ah, cool. So do you have, is your framework, obviously you probably have thought of that already with your abstraction layers, is supporting a bunch of different game types, have you thought about the different things you want to do in advance? Did you pre-build in some of the ideas you would need for things like roulette and dice games, etc.?
I've been thinking about it. Everything I've made for the cards, I've made every component I can of a card game reusable.
Okay.
But I haven't, for any non-card game, no, I haven't really hammered anything out as far as tangibles.
Sure. But it's probably way more within your grasp now than it was before Barstool Games. I'm sure you really learned a ton doing that project, because I can't even fathom how, because I know early on I was trying to convince you to do this without F4SE, but looking at how the final product came out, I'm like, okay, it's clear, some of this would not be possible. Maybe with animation files, but you would need so many, it would be ridiculous.
Yeah, I just didn't want it to be janky, and the way it is now with the UI and stuff, it just looks like part of the game.
Right.
I don't think I could have done that with, chaining a bunch of message boxes together and whatnot.
Right. Yeah, it was. Yeah, I think it would have required you would have had to jump through quite a few hoops, and at the end, it probably would have required. You would probably needed an animator and a HUD framework requirement, and it would have been. I think it would require quite a bit to get that to work, and then it would look pretty janky still. So, the way you did it is pretty awesome.
Thanks.
I'm definitely looking forward to seeing more card games coming out. Just because, and it's one of those things where it's almost like you're talking about with your C# training. It's almost like, because it almost doesn't matter that it exists in there, in the sense that you go in and play it, and you play a couple of hands, and you're like, okay, that's cool, and then you maybe never look at it again. But it's just the fact that it exists in there, the fact that it was possible, and the fact that you pulled it off as smoothly as you did is just so damn impressive that it's almost like it just. I'm betting, from your perspective, that is exactly one of those types of projects where you could confidently say, I did this for myself.
Yeah, that project was like a labor of love, definitely. I put more into it than maybe I should have.
But it's like one of those things, that players aren't spending, they're not spending 60 hours playing your blackjack game, because they could go, if they were going to do that, they could go do it online and maybe make some money in the process.
Yeah, it's a very peripheral thing. As far as gameplay, right. It's so on the side. It's what you do when in between a mission or something for 5 minutes.
Right. It would. I think. I know you guys did work. There is ways you can make a little bit of money in there, but for the most part, it's.
I really wanted to keep that so you couldn't abuse it. So you make a little money, not too much.
Right, not broke. Well, it's pretty easy to break the game already with money, which is unfortunate. I would love to see somebody build a proper economy mod to fix the games. I think Zawanal is trying as best he can with Horizon, but it's so easy to exploit these Bethesda games for money.
Yeah, I've never it's always between being too weak and getting killed to just being way too powerful, and it's
Yeah.
hard to get a nice balance like the whole playthrough through.
Yeah, yeah, and I don't know that there's any way to solve that, or if we would really want it to be solved, because it does feel really cool to be when you unlock that perk or get that new weapon, and you just feel like a badass. Like that's part of the fun of gaming. But I always felt like economy wise, most of these all the Bethesda games I feel like are very very broken. And so what I end up doing is I tend to just never use money. I just don't spend it because it's like this just feels. It feels too easy to cheat when you factor in the manipulating the game's economy and selling and buying things. And so instead, I that's why I really love the legendary system in Fallout 4 because of the randomization. Because then I don't have to worry about just cheating the cap system like I did in with Morrowind with the crab. Like I remember doing that every playthrough, and it would just be like I would just make god tier items with the spellcrafting system because I had unlimited money thanks to the crab. And then it was like, all right, so I'm basically just ruin every one of my own playthroughs. So like now that I don't want to ruin these games for myself, I tend to like it with Fallout 4 especially. I'm just like, all right, I'll just let the RNG gods decide when I get to be more powerful.
Definitely. Well,
So I just wanted to, so on the Barstool game, so to me, it seems, it's almost like a tech demo, but there's one game that I'm hoping you're planning on doing that was actually like legitimately fun to play outside of New Vegas, which is Caravan. Is that something you're planning?
it's something I want to do. The main thing that prevents me from like actually beginning work on that is assets. Suppose
Really?
I could
Okay.
just open up, Photoshop and make like a deck or something of unique cards, because I think doesn't the artwork have something to do with the way the game works? Like you have multiple decks and different artwork per one.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly how it works, but it was something like one-eyed face cards have a different value or something. It's been so long. I just remember like I actually legitimately enjoyed figuring that game out. Like, and I played many hours of just playing through Caravan. It was kind of like, and the like since then, like, and there's tons of games with card games. It used to be like a trope that like Final Fantasy would stick in and stuff. I think the only two games I really got hooked on in games were Caravan and Gwent. So like there was quite a bit of gap between games pulling off where I actually cared about their in game. So Caravan was really cool. I don't remember it now, like the specifics, but if you need art like that, God, I'm sure there are tons of people probably listening to this who hear that's what you need. That's the only thing holding you back. They'll send it to you tomorrow.
Well, maybe I'd say the first thing holding me back is not knowing how to play Caravan.
Ah, there you go. So it sounds like you need to dust off the old New Vegas.
Yeah, I do. I have it installed. I just got to get in there and learn how to play it again.
I would bet I think that was a popular enough thing, and there's been, I mean, the New Vegas modding scene was freaking massive. Still is pretty big. That I wouldn't be shocked if somebody doesn't have the rules detailed out, like on a wiki or something. So where you can just go read about it if you don't want to go play it again yourself, or if you don't want to have to reinstall New Vegas.
I have it installed. Yeah, I just need to play it some more.
If you need assets, here's a call to our listeners. If any of you is an artist and you want to help make a Fallout 4 version of the Caravan card decks, looks like Scrivener could use your assist.
Yeah, I need some fresh artwork so I can put together a Caravan deck. It'd be nice if someone could help with that.
Oh yeah, we'll definitely find you somebody for that. I think there's a lot of people who would love to see that, and if not, in the general community, just like the Fallout 4 New Vegas team would probably like you'd blow their socks off. You sent them that, because like the more they can pull off in that, the better. So I'm looking over your other mods right now. So the overlay framework, I think you made that distinctly for ODST, correct? Like that was what inspired you to make it.
What inspired me was really my Skyrim work, where I figured it out there.
Okay.
But ODST was the reason for me to basically port it to Fallout 4.
Sure. And now that relies heavily on F4SE, or were you able to do that largely with the vanilla available scripts and things?
Oh no, that is heavily F4C.
Oh man, that's so disappointing. This is one of those things where I would love to see Bethesda have a position, and I will 100% apply for this, Bethesda, if you're listening. A position where it's just kind of like a modding, what would you call it, like ambassador, where like my job would just be to figure out all of the things missing in the creation kit and all the hooks, and like make sure they're exposed for the next game. Because I think they're so close. Like there's only a handful of things that you can't directly do that they would need to expose, and like if we could just get a few more of those little things, we could have like full control and really overhaul this game, even in a way that Xbox players could enjoy.
Yeah, for sure. UI is one of those points where it's something every mod really needs to add some extra spice. But
Well,
the only thing we have is open close event.
Right. Yeah, we have almost. Oh yeah, and then you have to get real hacky outside of that. And I think that's what you did with Barstool is exactly like the holy grail for most of us hardcore modders is we want our stuff to be so seamless that you could, if someone told the person playing that this was in the game from the get-go, that they would be like, oh, okay. Like we want our stuff to just feel like it is there, completely seamless, that it wasn't hacky and added on. We want it to just feel like it's part of the game. And I think UI is the one spot there's a huge glaring issue. Like there are a few points scripting wise where there's some things blocked off unnecessarily. But I think like the animation system is fully open now, unlike there's a few things like grenade throwing is limited, but almost everything now in the creation engine is completely open for us to mess with, like just out of the box without
except UI.
Except UI, yeah, UI is so that is noble of you to take that task on of trying to figure out ways to hack your way through it. So that's why I was blown away by HUD Framework when it came out, because it was like, oh my god, he found a way to do it using the existing stuff. Like I didn't think that was ever possible.
I still don't see how it's possible. He uses a crazy hijacks one of the methods in the vanilla to transmit his messages for UI data. It's kind of insane.
Yeah. I think he found a weakness in it. I think like Bethesda hasn't. Basically, I think he found essentially what's a bug in the code, and he's just exploiting it. Like I think it's not a bug. It's
there's a function where you can pass a string in.
Right.
That string was intended for one kind of data, but he's passing a formatted string instead of, and
right.
Yeah,
but I don't think Bethesda anticipated there would be an SWF that was just like opened up, because he does it with like the show Pip-Boy or whatever, the Vault Boy thing. He like does that to load his SWF, and I assume they just figured the thing would just play and end, not thinking like, oh, somebody might use this and leave this thing open perpetually running in the background to accept
exactly.
data. So
Chesco did the same thing in Skyrim for some of his HUD widget stuff. The credits menu.
Okay.
Yeah, it has a string where you can pass a sequence ID, and he used that function, basically hijacked that string function to transmit data to his UI. He was able to
that's awesome.
Essentially do it with vanilla. It's kind of nuts.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, I've been like avoiding that sort of thing of like going down those rabbit holes of learning a lot of external programs, and because there's just so much I can do just with what's in front of me. But so like when I see that sort of thing, I'm always blown away by it. Like that people figure that stuff out and take the time to shoot it. I'm actually surprised you don't do more, given that you enjoy all of the programming outside. That because there's clearly, with F4SE and with crazy things you can do with Flash. There's a lot of stuff you can kind of hook into the game. Like you can just kind of force in creatively outside of the normal CK and Papyrus work.
You're talking like XSC plugins and stuff?
Yeah, exactly. Like things you could do, like you can build from outside that you can just force to work with it. Or like one of the things that I've had in the back of my mind that I've never pursued just due to lack of time is the fact that once F4SC is into play, there's no reason it can't. It can read basically anything from anywhere. And one of the things I've always wanted to see was Twitch API integration, where you could
into the game.
Yeah.
Itself.
Yeah, exactly. Like not necessarily that API into the game, but the idea of like viewers could interact with your Fallout 4 game should be totally feasible. There should be no reason that
there are some projects like that that
really?
have to do with the Pip-Boy mobile app, if you remember that.
Right. Yeah, I remember playing with that and being pretty impressed that worked.
Yeah, there have been on GitHub. There's some projects that do some of what you're talking about. We're integrating external services into the game itself.
Oh, that's fantastic. But that stuff seems like it might be up your alley just because you enjoy programming outside of just Papyrus. Like for me, the programming I do outside of Papyrus would have it's all web programming. So like I can't think of a lot of ways where it would be useful to integrate into Fallout 4.
It's been there the whole time, but until you just mentioned it, it really never caught my eye.
Because the fact that it's open to accepting essentially data from the internet through the Pip-Boy thing, like there's probably a ton that can be done without even a script extender. There's probably some creative ways you can manipulate the data that you can send from the app to the Fallout game. There's probably some cool stuff we could pull off.
Yeah, definitely. I don't think that's been explored enough.
Now, I don't know, and you probably wouldn't know either if you're not a console player. I'm wondering does that app work on Xbox or not? I think it does. I think
it does.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. Because I think that's where I did I know that is where I did my first Fallout 4 playthrough, but I'm just trying to remember if I had tried the app on it at that time or not. I think I did.
I have never tried it though because I don't actually have a smartphone.
Okay. You old school flip phone still?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh man, you're like a drug dealer. That's cool, man.
Yeah, I gotta have the burner.
Yeah, right. You gotta have your burner. Jeez.
But if I did, that'd be definitely something I'd be playing with.
Yeah, no, because it would be interesting to see what kind of data that it's sending and how encrypted it actually is, or if I'm really curious how much they would have done with that, because clearly, what we've seen so far from Bethesda with online stuff, it's not exactly their forte. So it would be funny to see if everything was just like raw string files being sent or something.
I think that's more like what it is.
Yeah. So probably easy to
it's not really data that has to be encrypted though. It's like. It's not exactly a security risk to you personally if someone knows that you're at the Red Rocket.
Right. Yeah, there's no personal data. But I mean, I guess theoretically somebody could mess with your game while you're playing. Like, depending on how it's set up, I have no idea.
Yeah, maybe. I'm not sure.
But I guess worst thing.
But it's not your bank account, is what I'm saying.
Right. Worst, they just burn through some of your stim packs. But yeah, that's one of those things where I think there's a lot of room to explore. I don't think many people have done. But F4SC obviously opens up all sorts of stuff, and that was something you saw a lot with some of Bethesda's past games, like New Vegas. There's that mod where they redid the entire physics engine with the script extender, where they just tap into an external AXE. Like some of that level of stuff, I haven't seen anything even close to that happening in Fallout 4 yet.
Yeah, maybe the game just needs to reach a certain level of maturity before that stuff starts coming around. That's like some late game stuff.
You don't think we're in the late game? So to me, we're already in that era.
I mean, I would say Skyrim's in its late game.
Oh, you think so? Well, yeah, I guess that's why we're now seeing like independent launcher Endarial, or is that how you say that game? I've never said that aloud.
Indral, something like that. Yeah, I know what you're saying.
But yeah, like it's got its own launcher, like, which is nuts. So yeah, that would make sense that you'd call that late game. It just seems like we're on 2019, so we're at like 3.5 years of Fallout 4. There's so much
That's
content.
like midlife.
Yeah, I mean, if you count number of mods, we're halfway to Skyrim's count. But I imagine that the number dries up dramatically the later you go, like the number of newly released things. But
yeah, and it's a little hard to measure too with the split between classic and special edition.
True. But it seems to me that Fallout 4 is I felt like it was kind of in the later game. Like you've seen some cool stuff released, but I haven't seen anything like mind blowing come out for Fallout 4. Like the people that were working on the really hardcore stuff, I haven't seen much from them in a while. Like Reg2K was always one you keep an eye on because he always is just doing stuff that's way outside the norm. But anytime you see somebody in F4SC, and there's not many people doing it, it's like you, Sidante, Reg was one of them, but he comes and goes. He like will show up for a couple of weeks and like blow our minds with something. And I think he's shown me a few previews of some projects that I won't spoil that he's working on. But other than that, I don't see a lot. I don't know of a lot of people. Do you know of anybody who's working on stuff? Maybe even if you can't reveal it, do you know people that are working on cool late game stuff for Fallout?
Not on the level we were just talking about with like the external programs, but yeah, there's people out there doing stuff with F4C still.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
I think there's a lot. This game has a lot more to offer for the modding scene still.
Awesome. Yeah, I agree with you there. I think even sans F4SE, there's a ton more to be offered. And obviously, we all know about the big projects like Cascadia and Miami, FO4 New Vegas, but that stuff tends to take like 4 or 5 years before it's even in demo state. So like that stuff's still a long ways off. But I'm personally more interested in those like mods that just bust something open, especially if they do it in a framework. Like MCM, like when that came out, it was like, oh, thank God, because it's just so much easier to do that than dealing with those damn holotapes. But yeah, we haven't seen much come out in that way. And I would say
Yeah,
like
there's
the last year.
I won't reveal, but there's a lot of cool stuff being being cooked up inside of those big projects like New Vegas and Cascadia. When they're released, they'll have a lot of framework sort of tech bundled with them. I think be really cool.
Well, some of them, they seem to be releasing that stuff as they go. Like the
New Vegas is already.
Yeah, they've been releasing some of their weapons, and like Nyanka did the level up menu for them, and like got that out in advance. So that was probably the coolest one I think that came out in the last year. That was
Shadow Shade and Shota.
Yeah,
they're hardcore frameworks.
Oh yeah, Shadow Shade's been working on, because I remember he was working on the skill system for Fallout to add into Fallout 4 forever.
Cascadia.
And it was like, yeah, well, even before Cascadia, he had been working on it independently, because I remember that was like a couple years ago when I was hanging out in the Nexus channel. He kept posting previews of what he was working on, and I always just assumed like that was like going to come out any moment now, and then it turned out I was like, oh nope, he's working on it he's putting it into some giant project and ended up getting pushed back. But those types of things I would love to see more of, and I maybe I'm just being impatient. Maybe it's like I'm too into the trenches with all this, that it like seems like more time is passing than it actually is relative to the other games.
You're not wrong. Some time's been passing.
So there are some big gaps between some crazy mods.
Yeah,
But,
a lot of them are out in some capacity, like you said. Some of the frameworks have been releasing as they go, so you can.
Yeah.
They're not fully fledged, but they're ready in their infancy.
Sure. So would you? So I mean, I think you are more involved with the larger community than I am. I think you have more connections with different teams and stuff. Where I have kind of created my own little garden over here with some settlement stuff. And I'm more focused on like working with new people who've never modded before and getting them trained. So would you say, from your experience working in both Skyrim heavily and in Fallout heavily, would you say that the mod scene is smaller, larger, the same size as what Skyrim was in its heyday?
I would say it's probably about the same size. It's just not in the same places as we're used to.
Okay. So it's you think it's slower coming to its fruition, or?
The community's there. It's like the same level as Skyrim was. It's just it's not all centralized, sort of like it used to be with Skyrim, where you can just get a nice, clean snapshot of the community in one place. It's more like lots of split, smaller groups working together, and they're not always necessarily all talking to each other.
Right, and I don't think that that's in like any intentional thing.
No,
like
it's not.
I think often, like if I reach out to the few people I do know on some of those other teams, if they have information like about a problem I have, they never withhold. Like I've never come onto a point where it's just like, no, I can't tell you that. That's top secret. It's usually like, oh yeah, let me ask somebody. Like they'll probably be able to help you through that problem. So I don't think that there's any intentional fragmenting of the community. I think it's
not fragmented. More, it's just organized differently.
Sure. Yeah, there seem to be. It's hard to say on that. I do, because I see a lot of certain types of work always being the same person, like same couple of people involved. Like there are a few heavy hitters like Nyanka who know so much more than everybody else about one thing that they end up just doing. They're the only one doing that type of work, which is probably slow. It's probably slowing down the major developments too, like the lack of people in those super specialized fields. Like
yeah, that's kind of why I stick to the UI stuff, not really because I like it. I feel like I'm one of like 3 people that do it.
Right. Yeah, there's not a lot of depth there. Whereas like I think animation is another one. It's always like War Daddy, Haru, and like just a couple of people that are actually like
Yeah,
do
War
most
Daddy
of
and
the
Haru.
right. They do most of the work for the whole community, and that's kind of a problem.
Yeah, it is.
So I don't know what the best way to break out of that is. Like it's almost like I mean tutorials would definitely help. Like that's why I'm very very excited about Rizzler's tutorials because he actually covers weapon animations and third person animations. So hopefully that'll open up some barriers for those people on the fringes who are maybe a little bit interested. They have the 3D skills, but they're not ready to commit the resources to learn. Because like there's two barriers to entry as far as I can see. One is having the general skills, so like being a programmer or being an artist or whatever. Then the next barrier is figuring out the steps to get your craft into the game. And I think that those two can require different mentalities. Like I think you and I are the type of people who enjoy the challenge of just solving a problem in general. So it's like, I don't care how much work I have to do. If like I want to do something, I will find my way through it. I'll bash my head into it. I don't care if I have to step outside of my comfort zone, learn new things. I'm happy to do it as long as I get to my goal. And then there's other people who are like, I'm good at this one thing. And if you tell me how to take my skill and put it here, I will do it. But I'm not going to climb over walls or bash through barriers to do it.
Yeah,
So,
definitely. That's a problem. I'm not sure the best way to go about solving it, except maybe the people that are in those roles with those specialized fields. It only takes like one guy to make this awesome breakout tutorial, and then that opens up a floodgate. I mean, I'm
right.
guilty of it. You don't see me writing too many UI tutorials on how to reverse them or scripting. It's exhausting.
Yeah, but you get
to
a
do
pass.
That.
You get a pass because you've done so much on the creationkit.com site. So you've probably put more hours than any of us into the equivalent of tutorials. So, because that documentation is invaluable because that's anybody first time modding. That's probably one of the first stops they go to. So if they can't find it there, they're going to just assume, well, I guess I'll never know.
Yeah.
But
that's, yeah, who knows? Maybe you just need one of these guys to come out with an awesome tutorial, and that sort of just opens up the floodgates to it.
Yeah. So yeah, so UI is one of the problems. Animation is a problem in the sense of like it's very complicated to get started. But the other problem with animation is the inavailability of the software. Like the fact that the only software that can do it effectively, you can't even purchase. Like you pretty much we're all, if we want to do it, we're forced to pirate almost. Or if you have, the right connections. Like I happen to have licenses because I've been involved in this forever and through work. But like most people, if you tell them, hey, you have to have 3D Studio Max 2013, they're just like, well, Autodesk won't sell it to me. So I guess I'm not allowed.
Wink.
Right. Then it just becomes time to sail the seven seas. But I don't even like doing that. It makes me like, even though like I remember I pirated like crazy when I was a teenager. Because like who could afford all the games that were coming out when you're in high school?
I didn't have $1,500 just laying around for that.
Right. Oh yeah, for software especially. Old. Yeah, exactly. Like trying to learn 3D software in high school. Like, well, I'm never gonna have the money for that. But now it feels I don't feel comfortable in telling people to go pirate. So
yeah, I'm not comfortable, and I don't support that line of thinking these days either.
Right. Me neither. Now that I'm in software development for a living, now I'm like, okay, I see the damage of pirating software because it's a lot of work to develop software, and then just for have everybody to go yank a copy is pretty detrimental. Though at the same time, I also can feel for the fact that we are also in this weird line of work where we have no production costs to create additional copies of our labor. So then that's where I can like start to see the side of the pirates of being like, you develop this software and you get to make money off of it forever, but it's not like a good. It's not like like a car company. They produce the car and then they have to continue to provide the materials to do so. Whereas like there's almost zero material support required to continue to release or to continue to sell copies of a piece of software, especially now with the internet, like where it's just like everything's digitally transferred. So I can see both sides of it in that regard.
Well, when something's free and you have or at least a free version, and you have people, from 15 years old become experts into their 20s using that software their whole life, and then go get a job. That's what they're going to say they know how to use, and that's what companies are going to end up using is what everyone knows how to use.
Yeah.
So it's not a direct detriment to.
Right. I think that's why like stuff like that doesn't ever they never do the crazy crackdown level that like music companies have done. And in fact, I think even now, like like music and movie studios, they've all realized that like, at the end of the day, it's just a numbers game. Like we just need as many people as possible using our stuff. Or like Netflix and HBO are both like, you know what, go ahead and share your accounts. Like we just want our stuff to be the most popular because that's where that's when we'll make the most money. So it's but either way, that's one of the barriers I think also is the lack of availability of software for the animation side of things.
Yeah, definitely agree.
Are there any other shortcomings you see in modding for like other systems in Fallout 4 that, or what did you call it, a black box? You call the UI a black box of things like just nobody wants to touch it? Or do you see any others in the engine that you think there's room for some expert to come in and crack some things open?
Oh, geez, yeah. I mean, so many. I'm sure there's people out there screaming like, "Yes, this system," but it's just I've only turned my eyes onto so many things. I'm sure there's dozens of other things like that.
Yeah, I tend to just keep. I mean, like I haven't run into any brick walls that would prevent me from doing certain things except for UI stuff, and then so that to me is one of the big ones. And then animation for me, the issue is always just lack of people who know how to do it. But beyond that, I haven't really run into anything I can't do. But it could just be like the type of gameplays that I'm not interested in a ton of like fast-paced stuff. Like there's probably some things I couldn't do with the way I develop mods with a lot of Papyrus that I couldn't do if they needed to be timely. Like one of the advantages to something like Sim Settlements is if it's not working at the microsecond level, it doesn't matter. If something takes 15 seconds in a building simulator, it's not a big deal. Maybe
the trick is to design your stuff so that it doesn't need to be that close in timing.
Right. Well, and I think that's why a lot of Bethesda's stuff weirdly is actually tied into the animations, because then natively it's tied into the frame rate. So like some of the weirdest stuff, like using stim packs, like the actual use of the stim pack doesn't actually occur until the right frame in the animation. It's very strange, like totally counter to what I would do as a developer. Like if I was developing the system from scratch, there's no way I would ever be like, well, this thing has to be baked into the animation. That's insanity to me. So like there are.
Yeah, it sounds like insane to me, but it's a really big project, so I don't want to come out and say, well, it could have been done better just because I have no idea.
Right. Well, and I mean, some of this it probably can be done better, but it's like they don't want to. Bethesda can't be expected to completely reinvent the wheel with every new game. Like it's something they have to just be like, well, this is still good enough for our particular implementation or our use or our need. That it would be like to try and rebuild every system with every new game would probably be overkill. So like that's probably something they came up with, 10 years ago for their engine. It worked great at the time. Maybe it doesn't need to be that way anymore, but why reinvent the wheel if it's still functioning for what you need? But that's something that's fascinating to me of like what are our roadblocks right now? And so far for me, it's UI for real. Like that's a hard limitation in the game engine. And then there are a couple of things you can't do in Papyrus natively, like interact with all the details of armor and weapons. Like that's a big blind spot in the Papyrus. But other than that, like most things, you can pretty much do them given the tools Bethesda has given us, which is pretty awesome.
I'm very happy with the new Papyrus 2.0. It's amazing.
Yeah, it'll be cool to see. I actually am going to end up, when 76 puts out private servers, I'm probably going to pay for one just long enough to see what they added. Like I was hoping that the game was going to capture my imagination enough to where I would be like, transition to that once private servers came available. Now, after it's been out for as long as it has, and I still don't care. Like I'm not, like I just don't want to log in anymore.
I feel the same way. Like it's exhausting playing that game. It's tiring.
Yeah, it's not exciting to go into. It's just more like,
but I still have really good feelings about it. Like seeing the way they pulled it off, it gives me really good confidence in their ability to like evolve that tech later on.
Right. That's what I've said a lot about this as well, is the fact that like what Bethesda tends to do is they will develop new stuff for their engine and then they keep it around even if they don't directly use it. There's like the hooks and elements of it are still in their engine. So like for example, even if they don't put multiplayer in their next couple of games, likely the hooks that they created for 76 will exist there so that we'll be able to tap into it for modding theoretically. unless they, I don't know how much, if they've had to fork off for 76 or whatnot.
And that what is that game?
Starfield, yeah.
I think that game's gonna utilize that multiplayer tech probably a lot.
That I mean,
guess
that's what I would guess too. Just because multiplayer is pretty much the de facto standard way if you want to make a lot of money. And like Bethesda has shown us, they're trying to get in, and who can blame them? Like if they're going to put their effort, if they're going to put in 5 years of effort in a game, they would rather make hundreds of millions on it than just than tens of millions.
Yes. Would you like less money?
Right. So, and obviously, like us fans of like the RPG genre, we were like, no, get that multiplayer crap out of here. Give us our single player stories. At the same time, I would love to see Bethesda have a giant hit on their hands, just because then if they truly are passionate about single player RPG experiences, they would then have the funding to do all the crazy stuff we want.
That's what really gave me that good confidence. Is I was playing 76 and it felt like I was in a single player game time.
Sure.
And that gives me good confidence for them to be able to pull that off better in future titles.
Right. Yeah, and it's so unfortunate that most people playing online games don't want a single player experience, so it was kind of a weird mix of stuff. But I'm definitely I guess the point was I'm gonna definitely pick up or try out a server for a while to see what they changed in Papyrus. I'm very, very curious about that.
I am too. I don't want to pay any money, but I want to see what you figure out.
It depends on what they charge per month. My bet would be they would be like $10 a month for a server, and like it's like, okay, I'll drop $20 so I can spend a couple of months dicking around in their servers and see what you can do. But it would be like Papyrus natively. I can't think of a good way for that to just work in a multiplayer scenario. Like you're gonna need. I don't know how they're gonna handle that. Like if it's gonna have some new central hook to it, or if it.
I think just as simple as changing the objects instead of having player.
Right.
It's probably more like it's decentralized now.
Right. Almost like you got to grab an alias to figure out that has the correct players in it, and etc.
I think there is probably going to be new forms or something.
Yeah, that'll be. So I'm very curious about seeing how it works in a multiplayer environment and what additions they added, because whatever additions we find in that, we can count on those likely being available in future titles. So like even if I'm not interested in modding 76 because the game doesn't interest me, then looking forward to after that, because I love the Elder Scrolls series. Starfield is intrigued to me. I have no idea if it'll be good or not, or if that'll be the type of thing I want, but I could definitely see moving to some of their other titles, especially because the skills all transfer. So like, people like yourself, you come from Skyrim, and most of the work you've done and most of the knowledge you've earned in your time there, you were able to use the majority of it for Fallout 4, which is pretty awesome.
Exactly, yeah.
So
you can learn a lot from 76 and then put it on the next title you're interested in.
Right. My concern there is probably something you've experienced with now that you've dipped your toes in the devil water that is F4SE, is that it's hard to go back. Like if you were to try and build something without F4SE now, it's probably a struggle, because you'd be like, oh, this would be so easy. I'll just do this. Oh, I don't have that function.
Yeah, there's a lot of that.
Yeah.
That I don't. When I start a project, I don't consider not using it. So.
Right. I have that problem. Like when people have asked me, like, hey, could you do sim settlements for Skyrim? And I'm like, probably. Like it's probably feasible. But like when I start looking through the Skyrim CK or Papyrus, and I'm like, oh my god, they don't have this, they don't have this, they don't have this. So like, and then it's all these wheels I'd have to reinvent, where I'm just like, that just sounds so painful. I don't think I want to do it. Like,
you think Fallout 4 is tedious? Skyrim, the way you got to set up the scripts it's more tedious.
Oh man, like when I saw the timer system in Fallout 4, I was like, oh my god, this is a miracle. This is so good. Like compared to the on enter frame garbage, like so much.
Yeah,
better.
On update, yikes.
Right. Talking deep on the Papyrus side, but yeah, the improvements Bethesda keeps making are impressive, and hopefully we'll see more stuff come in Fallout 4 before, because it's going to be a long time before we see Fallout 5 now. Like they've announced their next two games. they're 3 to 4 years apart between each of their games, if not longer. Unless, of course, one of the things that I haven't considered yet with Bethesda's development cycle is the fact that because we've been watching them expand like crazy. Like now they're up to 4 studios for Bethesda proper, for Bethesda Game Studios. We don't know what that's gonna do to their dev cycle. Like, does that speed it up all of a sudden? Like, they're just now got their 4th studio in place. Like, it's probably taken them a few years to like get everybody trained into how they work, get them to know their toolkit. Like at some point, that's all got to pay dividends and allow them to just start rapid fire producing content. So like, even though we're used to like 3 to 4 years between games, it could all of a sudden become, they're a studio house that can do one every year and a half or every 2 years, and then we could be seeing like Starfield, Starfield 2020, or Elder Scrolls 6 2022, and then all of a sudden Fallout 5's on our doorsteps. So it's hard to say, but I'm betting we've got quite a few years left of Fallout 4.
Even if it was 5 or 6 years until the next Fallout, like,
right?
I mean, that's fine. Like, people still mod the game for that long.
Well, yeah, I mean, people still mod Oblivion. Fallout 3 today. Yeah, people still mod Oblivion and Morrowind and shit. So, yeah, the idea of them not modding Fallout 4 again. But I tend to be the type that I will move on to the next game, which is why I was so disappointed, I think, in 76, because I was like, okay, I could see moving on to another game. Like, I've done a lot with Fallout 4. So, like, I'm definitely not the type that sticks around with these old games for a long time. Instead, I'd come back as a player and be like, every couple of years, be like, all right, let's see what the modding scene's doing and download them all. Which I actually haven't done to Skyrim in quite a while. I don't know about you.
No.
Haven't had that urge to go back and play and see what the community's up to?
No. I mean, I haven't even played Skyrim for as much time I spent on it. I never did the main quest.
No, never finished.
And I still have no desire to go back and figure it out either.
It's I mean, it's fine. It was a fine quest. Like I very much appreciated the fact that you could do playthroughs with completely ignoring it. Like if you outside of the little opening sequence, which with alternate start mods you could get past that, but after that little sequence with the dragon, they basically don't hammer you over the head with it the whole time. You can just like skip that first dungeon, and then the rest of the quest never occurs until you decide to do so. So you could really treat it like a sandbox game. So.
Yeah, back then I thought that part was a little restrictive, but hindsight, yeah, you could. What is it? Unbound. That quest just basically take off and do what you want. Right.
Yeah, it was a pretty cool feeling. In fact, I would say with out of all the playthroughs I've done in Skyrim, I think I've only completed the main quest twice ever. And then the rest of the times I just get distracted and doing whatever the hell else I want, or burying myself in mod content because there's so damn much of it.
I used to just it'd be like a forest simulator for me, / me being like a highway robber or something.
Awesome, man. Well, I guess the thing that I think both of us would agree we would like everyone to take away from this is make room in your load orders for framework mods, please, because the more people who download those and the more highly endorsed those are, the more likely we'll see more mod authors using them, and we'll get cooler mods because we can just build off of each other's work instead of having everybody try and start from scratch because people complain about requirements.
Yeah, maybe we can put together a few links that we can to some frameworks that we can put together.
Yeah, that's a good idea. In fact, I think one of the things I'm working on currently, just in outside of modding specifically, but is I've got a playthrough going of Fallout 4 on YouTube, and I'm trying to get the community to tell me about all their favorite mods, and we're building up the ultimate mod list. So I should probably grab all of your frameworks, and even if I'm not using them yet, just put them in that list, so that way eventually we get to a point where it's like, here's the list that the community and I determined after many hours of playing, the ultimate list of mods you should start with, and get all those frameworks in there. So we can see some more. Yeah, that should definitely be on my plan. Do you have any frameworks in mind that you'll be doing in the future, or is it just kind of as you're going with your projects, if one turns out to work, looks like it could be a public framework, you release it that way?
Yeah, I sort of let the need reveal itself to me and then let it happen rather than try to start out trying to make one to do something. Sure. I need the need to have it first.
Right. So but nothing's struck out at you of things you have in your idea log of stuff that's going to come out here?
No, nothing I want to announce to
Right
make
on.
any promises.
Sure. Yeah, I know. That's one thing I try to avoid too, and why I tend to not announce my projects until we have like a release date is because I don't want. There are a lot of times I've kind of broken that where I'll like mention ideas I've had, but I try not to commit to anything because then there's just disappointment all the time if I can't do it or if I don't have time for it.
Yeah, I have a folder on my computer that I'm looking at. It has like about 40, 50 folders of just little projects in their infancy, like lots
Yeah,
of frameworks. But yeah, it's nothing mature enough I want to share.
fair enough. Well, you heard it here first. Scrivener has 40 or 50 frameworks coming. He's committing to them now.
Yeah,
uh,
summer 2019,
Summer
all
2019,
of
it's just
them.
a few months away. There's gonna be a huge dump on Nexus. Well, man, I look forward to seeing what you do with Barstool Games. It's very impressive. Once again, I'll remind everybody, if any of you is an artist out there and wants to see Caravan come to Fallout 4, Scrivener's looking for some art, so help him out.
Yeah, give me the art and I'll put it in.
And then teach you how to play Caravan again.
Yeah, and I need that too.
Right on, man. All right, well, it's been awesome talking with you. Appreciate you taking the time. Are there any other mods we didn't talk about that you want to promote before we sign off here?
No, I think he covered them all.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for everything you do for the community, man.
Oh, thank you.
All
And
right, buddy.
contribute to your wiki, everyone. I want to throw
Yeah,
that
contribute
out
to your local wikis. Help out. It's not a one-man job.
there. It is not. All right,
Well,
thanks, King.
Yeah, take care, man.